It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors. And I've no intention. Now I've started to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this. Terrible.
The moment the order was signed, a chapter of royal history ended. No warning, no gradual transition, no carefully staged compromise. King Charles made a decision that stunned the palace from top to bottom. Queen Camilla's royal role was cancelled after Prince William revealed a hidden truth that could no longer remain buried. Behind closed doors, emotions exploded, loyalties fractured, and one family found itself facing a reckoning unlike anything it had experienced before. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the silence around him was not ordinary silence. It was the kind that arrives when everyone understands a decision has crossed the point of no return. For months, the monarchy had smiled in public and offered the country a picture of calm. But behind palace walls, that calm had cracked. The crown, meaning the living institution of monarchy, and the public trust attached to it, now faced a threat inside its circle. William had not come to his father with anger alone. The prince came with proof, and that made the moment dangerous. He had spent weeks choosing every word carefully, because he knew one sentence could wound Charles, shake Camilla, and alter the household. The future king understood that exposing the hidden truth would not simply challenge the queen consort's position. It would force the king to decide whether loyalty could survive when duty demanded something colder. Camilla felt the change before anyone said it openly. Senior aides who once briefed her began speaking in careful phrases. Meetings appeared without her name attached. Doors closed sooner. Conversations stopped when she entered. The queen consort knew palace distance when she saw it, and this distance carried judgment. Charles struggled, because the choice cut into two parts of his life. As husband, he saw the woman who had stood beside him through pressure. As king, he saw an institution that could not afford another fracture. When William placed the evidence before him through a documented private account, prepared for the monarch's review, Charles read enough to understand that silence was no longer protection. It was risk. The order came swiftly. Camilla's royal role was cancelled, and her public responsibilities were restructured, meaning her official duties and influence within palace operations were reduced. Charles set down the pen. Camilla learned the decision had already been finalized before she could fight it, and one question became impossible to ignore. What had William uncovered? The cancellation shocked the institution. But the real story began with the people standing at the center of the storm. Before the public heard a single word, 3 people were already carrying the weight of the crisis. Charles faced the most painful decision of his reign. Camilla confronted the possibility that everything she had built could disappear overnight. William stood at the center of the controversy, knowing his revelation would change relationships that had defined his entire adult life. This was not merely a constitutional moment. It was deeply personal, and the consequences would cut straight through the heart of a family. Charles had leaned on Camilla through years when the monarchy felt cold, demanding, and unforgiving. She had been his companion when public pressure grew heavy, and she had learned how to stand beside the king without flinching. The monarchy, meaning the system of royal leadership built around duty, public service, and national symbolism, mattered because one crack in trust could spread far beyond palace walls. Charles understood that danger. Camilla understood it too. William carried a different burden. His growing role placed him closer to the decisions that would shape the crown's future, and the prince knew that silence could become its own betrayal. He had not wanted this moment. He had not wanted to bring painful information to his father. But the future king had seen enough to believe the matter could not be ignored. Camilla began to feel the walls closing in when meetings moved ahead without her name on the list. Aides who once spoke warmly became careful. Briefings became shorter. The queen consort heard polite answers, but she felt the warning beneath them. She knew distance inside palace life was never accidental. It was preparation. William wrestled with the cost of his choice before he revealed anything. In a documented private account prepared for Charles, the prince laid out what he had learned and why it mattered. He knew the king would not hear it as politics alone. Charles would hear it as a wound. The revelation touched trust, family, and the image the monarchy needed to protect. Senior palace figures had already sensed something moving in the background. A confidential review, meaning a private examination of sensitive facts before a royal decision, had been underway for weeks. Its existence explained the sudden caution, the closed doors, and the strange silence around Camilla's schedule. Charles received the private briefing and said nothing for several minutes. Then the king dismissed everyone from the room. That silence frightened the people who knew him best, because Charles was not avoiding the truth anymore. He was measuring its cost, and the hidden truth had not emerged suddenly. It began with one forgotten incident that few people first understood. To understand why the king's decision became unavoidable, it is necessary to return to the moment everything first started to unravel. Long before the cancellation order, there was a single moment that seemed insignificant at the time. It happened during a private royal ceremony, attended by only a small circle of trusted figures. No headlines followed. No public controversy erupted. Yet years later, palace officials would quietly point to that evening as the beginning of a chain reaction that ultimately led to one of the most dramatic decisions of Charles's reign. It was the point of no return. William remembered the ceremony because something about it felt wrong before anything was said. The Private Heritage Foundation ceremony, meaning a closed royal event held to support historic charities and preserve royal-linked traditions, should have been simple. The palace had spent years managing disagreements through quiet talks, that Charles believed those methods could still hold the family together. The king trusted old routines because they had protected him before. Camilla moved through that evening with confidence, but William watched one exchange that unsettled him deeply. The queen consort spoke in a guarded conversation with a senior figure, and the prince heard enough to know the words did not match what had later been presented to his father. He did not react in the moment. He did not interrupt. But the future king carried that contradiction out of the room like a stone in his chest. Charles initially brushed aside William's concern because the king wanted peace more than confrontation. He believed tension could be handled quietly, especially when family, reputation, and duty were tangled together. Camilla also understood that palace disagreements often faded when nobody fed them. She expected the same to happen again, but this time, silence did not bury the problem. It sharpened it. William began asking careful questions through a documented private review prepared for his own records, and each answer pulled him closer to the same disturbing conclusion. The conversation at the ceremony had not been a stray remark. It had been a crack in a larger story. Senior figures who once thought the family tension was contained began to notice the shift. William became quieter in meetings. Charles became more cautious when Camilla's name entered discussion. The queen consort sensed the air changing, but did not yet know that one private exchange had started moving against her. The hidden truth grew from that single ceremony into something far harder to dismiss. William did not reveal it immediately because he knew the damage would be severe. Charles did not want to believe it because belief would demand action. And once the prince finally decided to confront the matter directly, a meeting was arranged that would permanently alter the balance of power inside the palace. The evidence gathered over time eventually led to a face-to-face encounter neither Charles nor Camilla could avoid. The confrontation lasted less than an hour, yet its impact would echo for years. No cameras entered the room. No official record captured every word. But those who witnessed the aftermath understood immediately that something irreversible had occurred. William arrived carrying answers. Charles entered carrying doubts. Camilla walked in expecting a discussion. She walked out facing a reality she never imagined possible. The future of her royal role was hanging by a thread. Charles requested the meeting because delay had become impossible. The king wanted only William and Camilla present, with no aides, no advisors, and no careful voices softening the truth. Palace aides, meaning the staff who manage royal schedules, messages, and private arrangements, were told to remain outside and prevent every interruption. That mattered because this was no longer routine family tension. It had reached the level of a decision that could alter the public face of the crown. William spoke first, and the prince kept his voice controlled. He presented the information through a documented account, prepared for the king's private review, knowing each detail would strike Charles personally. The future king did not look away from his father. He knew the evidence could damage Camilla, but he also knew ignoring it could damage the monarchy even more. Camilla reacted as if the room had shifted beneath her. She challenged the timing, the meaning, and the motive behind what William had brought forward. The queen consort insisted the matter had been twisted beyond recognition, but her disbelief only deepened the silence around Charles. The king listened, and that frightened her more than anger would have. Charles reviewed the supporting documents one by one. He did not rush. He did not soften the moment. When the king placed the final page on the table, William understood that his father had crossed from doubt into decision. Camilla understood it too, and her composure began to break. The exchange turned sharp when the hidden truth could no longer be explained as confusion or misunderstanding. William pressed the point because the prince knew the monarchy's credibility depended on clarity. Camilla pushed back because she knew her role, her influence, and her future were slipping away in real time. Charles absorbed both voices, trapped between the woman beside him and the son who had forced the truth into the open. The meeting ended without comfort. No apology repaired it. No promise softened it. By the time the door opened, the question had changed. Action was no longer uncertain. Power was. And the confrontation answered one question, but it raised another far more important one. Who truly controlled the future of the monarchy? Power inside a monarchy rarely announces itself with dramatic speeches. More often, it appears in silence, signatures, and decisions made when nobody is watching. After the confrontation ended, Charles found himself alone with a choice only a sovereign could make. The evidence had been delivered. The emotions had been exposed. Now the responsibility belonged entirely to him, and the burden of that responsibility felt heavier than ever. Charles understood that nobody else could carry this decision for him. The king alone held the authority to restructure senior royal responsibilities, meaning he could change who represented the monarchy, which duties they performed, and how visible they remained in public life. That mattered because Camilla's role was not only personal. The queen consort stood beside him as part of the crown's image, and any doubt around her position could weaken trust at the worst possible time. Advisors gave Charles options, but none gave him peace. Some urged symbolic limits, small enough to avoid scandal, but strong enough to show control. Others pressed for decisive action, warning that hesitation would look like fear. The king listened, yet every option circled back to the same brutal truth. If William's concerns were serious, then protecting Camilla from consequence would place the monarchy itself in danger. Charles sat alone with the papers long after the room emptied. He read the final internal review, a private palace assessment used to test sensitive evidence before major decisions, and the words confirmed what he had been trying not to accept. William had not exaggerated. The prince had brought forward something real, and the king knew the son who had challenged him had also tried to protect him. The pen remained near Charles's hand, but he did not touch it at first. Camilla's name carried years of loyalty, pain, survival, and public struggle. The queen consort had stood beside him through storms that once seemed impossible to survive. Yet the monarch now faced a colder truth. Affection could comfort a man, but it could not guide a crown when credibility was on the line. Charles finally set the pen down, not because the decision became easy, but because delay had become another form of damage. He reached the conclusion that retaining Camilla's role would leave a permanent shadow over the institution. The king could not ask the public to believe in duty while refusing to apply it inside his own household. The decision was made in private, but privacy could not hold back its force. Once the order left that room, schedules would change, offices would shift, and Camilla would feel the full weight of a future rewritten without her consent. The signature may have completed the decision, but the emotional fallout was only beginning. Every major royal decision eventually becomes personal. For Camilla, that moment arrived when a private communication confirmed what she feared most. The role she had spent years building was gone. Titles remained, status remained, but the influence, visibility, and responsibilities that once defined her daily life had suddenly changed. The institution moved forward, yet one person was left standing still, confronting a reality she never expected to face. Camilla read the message twice before her hand lowered. The king's restructuring order, meaning the formal decision changing royal duties and public responsibilities, had already moved through palace departments. That mattered because it was not a warning or a proposal. It was action. Schedules were being changed. Ceremonial responsibilities were being reassigned. The queen consort had not merely lost a meeting. She had lost control of her own place inside the machinery of royal life. Charles knew the order would hurt her, but the king also knew delay would only deepen the damage. The monarchy needed to show discipline after William's documented account had forced the truth into the open. Public duties, meaning appearances and responsibilities carried out on behalf of the crown, were quietly moved to other senior figures. Every adjustment made the decision more real. Every removed engagement struck Camilla like a private humiliation. Camilla placed the notification down and did not move. The queen consort had survived public judgment before, but this felt different because the blow had come from inside. Close family members noticed her confidence fade in small ways. Her answers became shorter. Her tone became guarded. The woman who once entered palace rooms with certainty now seemed to measure every word before speaking. Charles felt the weight of that change, even from a distance. He had chosen the crown, but the king could not escape the human cost. Camilla's silence followed him through the day, and he understood that official language could not soften personal loss. Staff members soon learned that additional measures had already been prepared. Offices had draft schedules ready. Briefing notes had alternate names inserted. The speed of implementation revealed something chilling. This decision had not been created in panic. It had been waiting for the moment Charles gave permission. Camilla understood that truth last, and it hurt most. The queen consort realized the palace had prepared for a future with less of her in it, before she had been told directly. Yet while she confronted loss, another conversation was forming elsewhere, away from anger, away from procedure, and away from the cold language of duty. Amid the disappointment and anger, one quiet meeting created the first possibility of understanding. Away from advisors, schedules, and palace procedure, Charles and William finally spoke alone. No briefing papers separated them. No officials interpreted their words. For the first time since the crisis erupted, the discussion focused not on roles or responsibilities, but on trust. What emerged from that conversation would reshape their relationship and reveal why the king's decision was never truly about punishment. It was about protecting something larger than either man. Charles looked at William not as an opponent, but as the son who had carried a terrible burden into the room. The monarchy faced a defining moment, meaning a crisis that could decide how people judged its honesty and future strength. That mattered because public trust is not repaired by titles alone. It survives only when those inside the crown accept the same standards they ask from everyone else. William admitted the cost had been heavier than anyone knew. The prince said the revelation, delivered through his documented private account, had forced him to expose information involving someone close to the family. He had feared hurting Charles. He had feared what it would do to Camilla. But the future king feared something else even more, allowing silence to become protection for the wrong thing. Charles did not deny the pain. The king spoke of Camilla with sadness, not anger, and that made the moment even harder. He knew the queen consort would feel stripped of influence, and he knew his decision would be read as a final judgment. Yet Charles stood by it, because he believed the monarchy could not ask for loyalty while avoiding accountability. William listened as his father revealed something he had not said before. Charles had reached his conclusion before their final confrontation ended. The king had watched Camilla defend herself, had heard William press the evidence, and had understood that the truth had already changed the room. The decision had not been born from pressure. It had been born from recognition. Silence settled between father and son, but this time it did not divide them. William understood the sadness behind the order. Charles understood the courage behind the revelation. Both men accepted that preserving public trust required difficult sacrifices, and both knew those sacrifices would leave marks no official statement could erase. Outside palace walls, the story was preparing to break. Camilla's loss, Charles's decision, and William's hidden truth were about to become public language, public judgment, and public debate. What had been a private family crisis was now becoming a national conversation. The moment the news became public, the reaction was immediate. Television broadcasts interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rushed special editions to print. Crowds gathered outside royal landmarks searching for answers. Across the country, people debated loyalty, accountability, and the future of the monarchy. What had started as a private royal conflict transformed into a public spectacle, and one unforgettable image came to symbolize the nation's emotional response to the king's decision. Charles watched the reaction arrive faster than anyone expected. Media organizations dedicated hours of coverage to the royal development, calling it a rare moment when private family pain became public judgment. That mattered because the monarchy survives through trust, and trust depends on whether people believe duty applies to everyone inside the palace. The king understood the danger. He also understood why the decision had to stand. Camilla watched the coverage with a stillness that said more than anger could. The queen consort saw her private loss turned into headlines, debate panels, and national conversation. The press described the restructuring order, meaning the official change to her public duties and royal influence, as a historic shift in palace power. She had known the decision would hurt. She had not expected the whole country to discuss it like a verdict. William became part of the story even before he spoke publicly. Broadcasters framed the prince as the man whose documented account forced the truth into the open. They revealed that the decision had been prepared with unusual care, showing that this was not panic, revenge, or sudden emotion. It was planning. It was control. And that made the public reaction even stronger. One newspaper front page captured the moment with brutal simplicity. "The king's decision," it declared, beside a solemn image of Charles leaving a palace meeting. The headline mattered because it turned a complicated private crisis into one clear national symbol. Supporters saw strength. Critics saw heartbreak. Everyone saw consequence. Charles received both praise and blame within hours. Some praised the king for choosing institutional duty over personal comfort. Others saw Camilla's reduction as a painful humiliation. The monarch absorbed both reactions, because leadership had placed him exactly where no husband wanted to stand, between public trust and private loyalty. Camilla felt that judgment most sharply because the queen consort could no longer keep the crisis inside palace walls. William understood that the prince's revelation had changed not only his family, but the national conversation around accountability. And, as reactions settled and emotions cooled, attention turned from shock to meaning. Beyond headlines and controversy, the true significance of the decision was finally coming into focus. History often remembers moments not because they were comfortable, but because they changed the direction of an institution forever. The cancellation of Camilla's royal role became one of those moments. It exposed hidden tensions, tested family bonds, and forced difficult choices upon everyone involved. Yet when the turmoil finally settled, a clearer picture emerged. This was never simply a story about one person losing influence. It was a story about what the monarchy chose to become. Charles understood that the crisis had revealed something deeper than a disagreement between family members. The balance between loyalty and responsibility had proven far more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. The monarchy, meaning the institution that depends on public confidence as much as tradition, faced a difficult test. That test mattered because people were no longer judging only individuals. They were judging whether the crown could hold itself accountable when pressure came from within. Camilla reached a place she never expected to reach. The queen consort had spent years building a role beside the king, and losing much of that influence was painful. Yet time brought a difficult acceptance. She began to understand that the decision had become larger than any title, schedule, or position. The monarch recognized that fighting the outcome would only deepen the wounds already left behind. Closure arrived slowly, but it arrived. William carried his own scars from the ordeal. The prince knew his documented account had triggered events that permanently changed relationships inside the palace. Yet the future king also understood why he had acted. The hidden truth forced long-avoided issues into the open, and once exposed, those issues demanded resolution. What began as one uncomfortable revelation became the catalyst for a broader reckoning about trust. Charles never celebrated the outcome. The king carried visible sadness because the decision came at personal cost. But he also found peace in knowing he had acted according to duty rather than fear. The evidence mattered. The consequences mattered. Yet the final revelation was not hidden inside a document or private review. It was something larger. Trust remained the monarchy's most valuable asset, and once trust is damaged, every other achievement becomes harder to protect. William and Charles emerged from the crisis with a stronger understanding of their shared responsibility. Camilla moved into a different chapter of royal life, one defined by acceptance rather than uncertainty. The institution itself moved forward with greater clarity, carrying lessons learned through pain rather than comfort. The emotional wounds never disappeared completely. Some relationships changed forever. Some memories remained difficult. Yet the central conflict was resolved. The verdict was unmistakable. Charles chose the crown over comfort, duty over hesitation, and the future over the past. There was no further battle to fight and no mystery left unresolved. The decision had been made, its consequences had unfolded, and history had already begun writing its final judgment. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.